When Xeno scientists studied adrenaline, they finally understood human battle. Dr. Vexen pressed her 4 eyes against the observation glass and watched the human sleep. The creature looked so harmless lying there on the medical bed. Its chest rose and fell in a slow rhythm. Its hands were open and relaxed. There was no sign of the monster that had killed 12 Corvan warriors just 3 days ago. "Are you certain this is the same specimen?" asked Research Director Thalen. He stood behind her, his gray scales catching the blue light of the medical bay. "I am certain," Vexen said. "I saw the battle recordings myself. This human female tore through our best soldiers like they were made of paper." Thalen made a clicking sound with his throat. This was how Corvans showed doubt. "She weighs perhaps 60 of their kilograms. Our warriors each weighed over 200. How is this possible?" "That is what we are here to discover." The human's name was Sarah Chen. She was a cargo pilot who had crashed on Corvan Prime 3 weeks ago. When the military arrived to capture her, she had fought back. The battle lasted only 4 minutes. When it was over, 12 Corvan soldiers were dead and Sarah Chen had collapsed from exhaustion. Now she was in the Xenobiology Research Center, the most secure building on the planet. The Corvan High Council wanted answers. They needed to understand how one small human could defeat their finest warriors. Vexen had been studying aliens for 40 years. She had examined over 300 different species from across the galaxy, but she had never seen anything like humans before. They came from a death world called Earth, a planet so dangerous that most species would die within hours of landing there. The gravity was crushing. The weather was violent. The native life forms were brutal and hungry. Yet humans had not just survived on Earth. They had conquered it. They had spread across their world and then reached out into space. Now they were everywhere, these soft-looking creatures with their thin skin and their strange eyes. "Wake her," Thalen said. A medical technician pressed a button, and a soft hiss filled the room. The sleeping gas was being replaced with normal air. Sarah Chen's eyelids began to flutter. Vexen watched closely as the human woke up. First came confusion. The female looked around the room with wide eyes, taking in the strange equipment and the observation window. Then came recognition. She remembered where she was. Her body tensed. Her hands curled into fists. "Her heart rate is increasing," the technician reported. "Blood pressure rising. She is releasing. I don't know what this chemical is." Vexen looked at the monitor. A new compound was flooding the human's bloodstream. It had a complex molecular structure that she had never seen before. "What is that?" Thalen asked. "I don't know, but look at what it's doing to her body." The readings on the monitor were changing fast. Sarah Chen's muscle tension was increasing. Her pupils were growing wider. Her breathing was getting faster. She was still just lying on the bed, but her entire body was preparing for something. "Human," Vexen said through the speaker system, "can you hear me?" Sarah Chen turned her head toward the window. When she saw the 2 Corvans standing there, her lips pulled back from her teeth. It was a human expression that Vexen had learned to fear. They called it a smile, but it was not friendly. "I hear you," Sarah said. Her voice was calm, but there was something dangerous underneath it. "What do you want?" "We want to understand you. We want to know how you killed our soldiers." Sarah Chen laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "You attacked me, I defended myself, that's all there is to understand. But you should not have been able to fight them at all. You are smaller, you are weaker. Your body has no natural weapons, no claws, no fangs, no armor. How did you win?" The human sat up on the bed. The restraints around her wrists and ankles clicked tight, holding her in place. She looked down at them and then back at the window. "You really don't know?" "No." Sarah Chen was quiet for a moment. The strange chemical was still flowing through her blood, but she seemed to have some control over it. Her heart rate was slowing down. Her muscles were relaxing just a little. "We call it adrenaline," she said, "among other things." Vexen activated her data pad and started recording. "Tell me about this adrenaline." "It's a hormone, a chemical that our bodies make when we're in danger. It changes everything about how we work, makes us faster, stronger, harder to hurt." Sarah paused. "It makes us able to do things that should be impossible. And this chemical, it activates automatically when you are threatened." "Sometimes," Sometimes we can control it, sometimes it controls us. Thalen leaned closer to the window. Control it, what do you mean? Sarah Chen's smile got wider. I mean that right now, my body is filled with adrenaline because you're keeping me prisoner. And it's taking everything I have not to rip these restraints off and come through that window to tear out your throats. The two Corvins stepped back from the glass without thinking. Sarah Chen laughed again. Don't worry. The rational part of my brain knows that would be stupid, but the adrenaline part of my brain doesn't care about rational. It only cares about survival. Vexen recovered her composure and stepped forward again. You are saying that you could break those restraints if you wanted to. Maybe, maybe not. The thing about adrenaline is that you never really know what you can do until you try. I've heard stories about mothers lifting vehicles off their children, soldiers fighting for hours with wounds that should have killed them, people running through fire without feeling pain. Sarah shrugged. Adrenaline does things to us, changes us, makes us into something else. Something dangerous, Thalen said quietly. Yes, something very dangerous. Vexen made notes on her data pad. This was the first real clue she had found. This adrenaline compound was clearly the key to understanding human combat ability, but she needed to know more. I want to run some tests, she said. I want to study this chemical in your blood. Sarah Chen's expression changed. The smile was gone. Now there was something cold in her eyes. And what happens to me after your tests? Vexen hesitated. The High Council had not given specific orders about the human's fate. They wanted answers first. But Sarah Chen was a killer who had slaughtered 12 of their people. There would be consequences for that. I don't know, Vexen admitted. That is not my decision to make. Sarah nodded slowly. At least you're honest. That's more than I expected from my captors. Will you cooperate with my tests? The human was quiet for a long moment. She looked around the room again, studying the walls, the ceiling, the equipment. She was looking for escape routes, Vexen realized, looking for weaknesses. Even restrained and surrounded by enemies, this creature was planning and calculating. I'll cooperate, Sarah finally said, for now, but I want something in return. What do you want? Information. I want to know why your soldiers attacked my ship. I was just a cargo pilot making a delivery. I wasn't hurting anyone, but your people shot me down and tried to kill me. Her voice grew hard. I want to know why. Vexen looked at Thalen. The research director's scales had turned a darker shade of gray, which meant he was uncomfortable. The attack on Sarah Chen's ship had been a mistake. A new commander had given the order without proper authorization, but the High Council was not admitting this publicly. I cannot answer that question, Vexen said carefully, but I can try to find out for you. Sarah Chen studied her through the window. The human's strange two-eyed gaze was intense and unblinking. It was unnerving. Fair enough, Sarah said. Run your tests, I'll behave, but remember something, Doctor. What? Adrenaline isn't the only thing that makes humans dangerous. We're also very patient, and we never forget when someone wrongs us. The words hung in the air like a threat. Vexen felt a chill run down her spine, even though the temperature in the room had not changed. She was beginning to understand why the military was so afraid of these creatures. I will begin the tests tomorrow, she said. Get some rest. Sarah Chen lay back down on the bed and closed her eyes. Within minutes, her breathing had slowed and she appeared to be asleep again. But Vexen noticed that her hands were still curled into loose fists, and the adrenaline levels in her blood had not returned to normal. Even in sleep, the human was ready to fight. The next morning, Vexen arrived at the research center before the sun rose. She had not slept well. Her mind kept returning to the human's words and the cold look in her eyes. There was something deeply unsettling about Sarah Chen, something that went beyond her physical abilities. Vexen's assistant, a young Corvan named Krell, was already in the laboratory preparing the equipment. He was eager and intelligent, but he had never worked with dangerous specimens before. Vexen worried that he did not fully understand the risk. Good morning, Dr. Vexen, Krell said. I have prepared the blood analysis equipment as you requested. I also pulled all available research on human biology from the Galactic database. And what did you find? Krell's expression was troubled. Not much. Most species avoid contact with humans when possible. those who have studied them. Their research notes are incomplete. Many of the researchers died before they could finish their work. Died how? The records don't say, but I found one report from a Teloran scientist who spent 3 years studying human prisoners. His final entry said that he was beginning to understand why humans were so feared. Then the records end. Vexen felt that chill again. What happened to him? His research station was destroyed. All the humans escaped. They were never recaptured. This was not encouraging news, but Vexen had a job to do. The High Council was expecting results, and despite her fear, she was genuinely curious about these strange creatures. Science required courage. "Bring the human to the examination room," she said, "and make sure the restraints are secure." The guards brought Sarah Chen in 10 minutes later. She was walking calmly between them, her wrists and ankles bound by magnetic cuffs. She did not resist. She did not even look upset. She might have been going for a casual walk instead of heading to a laboratory where aliens would study her blood. "Good morning, Doctor," Sarah said. "Did you sleep well?" "No," Vexen admitted. "Did you?" "Like a baby. Being in danger always helps me sleep. Weird, right?" Vexen did not know what a baby was, but she understood the meaning. Sarah Chen was not afraid, or if she was afraid, she was hiding it very well. "Please sit on the examination table," Vexen said. Sarah complied, hopping up onto the table with an easy grace that surprised Vexen. The human moved like water, smooth and efficient. There was no wasted energy in her motions. "I am going to take a sample of your blood," Vexen explained. "Then I want to run some tests to measure your physical capabilities. Is that acceptable?" "Go ahead." Krell approached with the blood extraction device. It was a simple tool that used a small needle to pierce the skin and collect a sample. But when Sarah saw it, something changed in her body. Her muscles tensed. Her pupils dilated. The monitors showed a spike in her heart rate. "Easy," Sarah said, more to herself than to anyone else. "It's just a needle. You've had needles before." "You are afraid of this device?" Vexen asked. "No, well, maybe a little. Nobody likes needles." Sarah took a deep breath. "But that's not what's happening. My body is responding to a potential threat. The adrenaline is starting to flow. I can feel it." Vexen leaned forward with interest. "You can feel the chemical being released?" "Yes, it starts as a tightness in my chest. Then my hands start to tingle, my vision gets sharper, sounds get clearer." Sarah clenched and unclenched her fists. "It's like my body is waking up, getting ready for action." "And this happens every time you feel threatened?" "Every time, even for small threats, even for things that aren't really threats at all," Sarah laughed softly. "Our ancestors needed this response to survive. When a tiger was chasing you, adrenaline kept you alive. But now we don't have tigers anymore. We have needles and job interviews and traffic jams, and our bodies can't tell the difference." Krell carefully inserted the needle into Sarah's arm. The human winced but did not pull away. Dark red blood began to flow into the collection tube. "Fascinating," Krell said, studying the sample. "The color is so different from ours." Corvan blood was blue-green, filled with copper-based compounds that carried oxygen. Human blood used iron instead, which gave it that deep red color. It was such a simple difference, but it pointed to how differently their species had evolved. "That should be enough," Vexen said. "Krell, begin the analysis. I want to know everything about this adrenaline compound, how it's made, how it works, what it does to the body." "Yes, Dr. Vexen." While Krell worked at the analysis station, Vexen turned her attention back to Sarah. "Now I would like to test your physical capabilities, strength, speed, endurance. Is that acceptable?" "Sure, but I should warn you, I'm not in peak condition right now. I haven't eaten properly in days and these restraints don't help." "We will take that into account." The first test was simple. Vexen asked Sarah to squeeze a pressure sensor as hard as she could. The device would measure the force she could generate with her grip. Sarah wrapped her fingers around the sensor and squeezed. The number on the display climbed steadily, 20 kilograms of force, 30, 40. Then it stopped at 45. "Is that normal for your species?" Vexen asked. "About average for a human female, I think. Men are usually stronger." Vexen made notes. 45 kilograms was respectable, but it was nowhere near what a Corvan warrior could produce. Their soldiers could generate over 200 kilograms of grip force. Now, Vexen said, I want to try something different. I want to see what happens when your adrenaline is activated. Sarah's expression became wary. What do you mean? I want to simulate a threatening situation. I want to see how your strength changes when you feel endangered. That's a dangerous game to play, Doctor. I know, but I need to understand. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then she nodded slowly. Okay, but don't say I didn't warn you. Vexen pressed a button on her control panel. The lights in the room suddenly dropped to a dim red glow. At the same time, a loud alarm began to sound, a harsh, grating noise that hurt Vexen's ears. Sarah's reaction was immediate. Her whole body changed. Her muscles locked into tension. Her breathing became fast and shallow. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for the source of the danger. Squeeze the sensor again, Vexen said through the speaker. Sarah grabbed the device and squeezed. This time the numbers climbed much faster, 50, 60, 70, 80. The display kept climbing until it reached 95 kilograms, more than double her previous result. Then there was a crack, and the sensor shattered in Sarah's hand. Vexen stared at the broken device. Impossible, she whispered. The alarm stopped. The lights returned to normal. Sarah looked down at the pieces of the sensor in her palm. Her hands were shaking. I told you, she said quietly. Adrenaline changes everything. Dr. Vexen spent the next several hours analyzing the blood sample. What she found made her feel small and frightened in ways she had never felt before. Adrenaline was not just one chemical. It was part of a complex system that humans called the fight or flight response. When danger was detected, the human brain sent signals to special glands that released a flood of hormones into the bloodstream. Adrenaline was the most powerful of these, but there were others: cortisol, norepinephrine, dopamine. Together, these chemicals transformed the human body. They redirected blood flow from non-essential organs to muscles that might be needed for fighting or running. They dilated the airways to allow more oxygen to reach the lungs. They slowed digestion and heightened awareness of surroundings. They even changed how the brain processed pain, allowing humans to ignore injuries that would cripple other species. This is remarkable, Krell said, looking at the data on his screen. Their bodies are essentially self-modifying. When danger appears, they become different creatures. Not different, Vexen corrected. More, they become more of what they already are. She thought about the battle recording she had watched. Sarah Chen facing the 12 Corvan warriors. The soldiers had been larger, stronger, better armed. By any logical measure, they should have won easily. But Sarah had not fought logically. She had fought like a wild animal, fast and vicious and relentless. She had taken hits that should have put her down and kept coming. She had moved with a speed that should have been impossible for someone her size. The adrenaline. It had to be the adrenaline. There's something else, Krell said. Look at this. He pointed to a section of the analysis results. It showed the chemical compounds that were present in Sarah's blood when she was calm versus when she was agitated. When she's at rest, her adrenaline levels are already higher than we would expect based on what we know about other species. It's like she's always partially activated, always a little bit ready to fight. Vexen nodded slowly. That makes sense. She's a prisoner in hostile territory. Her body knows she's in danger even when nothing is happening. But look at this, Krell continued. When we triggered her response with the alarm, her adrenaline levels spiked to nearly 10 times her baseline, and they stayed elevated for almost an hour afterward. An hour? Yes, long after the perceived threat was gone, her body was still ready for battle. Vexen felt a chill. This explained so much. Human soldiers could fight for hours because their bodies stayed in combat mode long after the initial danger had passed. They didn't wind down the way Corvan warriors did. They stayed sharp, stayed ready, stayed dangerous. I need to know more, Vexen said. I need to understand the limits of this system. Dr. Vexen, I'm not sure that's wise. The human seems cooperative now, but if we push her too hard. I know the risks, but the High Council is expecting answers. They want to know how to fight humans, how to defeat them. Krell's scales shifted to a worried gray. And what will you tell them? Vexen was quiet for a long moment. She looked at the data on her screen, the hormone levels, the muscle readings, the broken pressure sensor. She thought about Sarah Chen lying peacefully asleep with her fists still clenched for battle. "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but I'm beginning to think the answer might be, you don't." The next day, Vexen ran more tests. She measured Sarah's reaction time and found it was twice as fast when adrenaline was active. She tested her pain tolerance and discovered that the human could endure shocking levels of discomfort without showing significant distress. She even tested her cognitive abilities and found that while adrenaline made some mental tasks harder, it dramatically improved others, especially tasks related to spatial awareness and threat detection. Each test revealed new aspects of human capability, and each test made Vexen more uneasy. "May I ask you something?" Sarah said during a break in the testing. "Of course. What are you going to do with this information?" Vexen hesitated. It was a fair question. "I will give my findings to the High Council. They will decide how to use them." "They want to know how to kill us more efficiently, don't they?" There was no point in lying. "Yes, probably." Sarah nodded. She did not seem angry. If anything, she seemed resigned. "I figured. That's usually what these things are about." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. You're just doing your job, and honestly, I don't think it's going to help them much." "Why not?" Sarah leaned forward, and there was something intense in her eyes. "Because adrenaline is only part of the story. It's not even the most important part." "What do you mean?" "I mean that humans have been fighting for survival since we came down from the trees. War is in our blood, not just the chemical part, the psychological part. We've spent thousands of years developing tactics, strategies, weapons. We've studied warfare like it was a science, because for us, it is a science." She gestured around the laboratory. "You're looking at my body trying to understand why I'm dangerous, but my body is just a tool. The real danger is up here." She tapped her temple. "In my brain, in the way I think." Vexen considered this. It was true that human tactical abilities were legendary among spacefaring species. Their military victories often seemed to defy all logic. "Tell me more," she said. Sarah smiled that dangerous smile. "Okay, I'll tell you a story, a real one from human history." Sarah began speaking, her voice calm and measured. Vexen listened with growing fascination and horror. About 800 years ago on Earth, there was a war between two groups of humans. One side had a massive army, hundreds of thousands of soldiers with the best weapons and training available. The other side had maybe 10,000 fighters, poorly equipped and badly outnumbered. "That seems like an obvious outcome," Vexen said. "The larger force should have won easily." "You'd think so, but the smaller force was fighting on their home territory. They knew the land, they knew the weather, and more importantly, they knew that they couldn't win a direct battle, so they didn't try." Sarah shifted on the examination table, her restraints clinking softly. "Instead, they used what we call guerrilla tactics. They would strike at night when the enemy was sleeping. They would attack supply lines instead of soldiers. They would blend in with the local population and disappear whenever the large army came looking for them." "This sounds dishonorable," Krell said from across the room. Sarah laughed. "Honor is a luxury that the weak can't afford. The smaller force didn't care about honor, they cared about winning. And they understood something that the larger army didn't. War isn't just about strength, it's about will." "Will?" Vexen asked. "The will to keep fighting, the will to endure, the will to sacrifice everything for victory." Sarah's eyes grew distant. The large army was fighting far from home. Their soldiers wanted to finish the war and go back to their families. But the smaller force was fighting for their homeland, for their survival. They were willing to fight forever if they had to. "What happened?" "The war lasted for years. The large army won most of the battles, but they could never finish the job. Every time they thought they had won, the smaller force would strike again from somewhere new. Eventually, the large army got tired. Their leaders lost patience. Their soldiers lost hope. They gave up and went home." Sarah met Vexen's eyes. "That's what I mean about the psychological part. Adrenaline can make a human fight harder for a few hours, but will can make a human fight harder for years, decades, generations." Vexen felt the chill again. She was beginning to understand why so many species feared humanity. It wasn't just their physical abilities. It was their refusal to accept defeat. You're saying that even if we found a way to counter the adrenaline response, it wouldn't matter. Not in the long run. You might win some battles, you might even win some wars, but eventually we'd figure out how you did it. We'd adapt. We'd find new ways to fight, and we'd keep coming until you were defeated or until we were all dead. Sarah smiled again, but this time there was no danger in it, only sadness. That's the blessing and the curse of being human. We never give up, even when we should, even when it would be smarter to surrender. We just keep fighting. The laboratory was quiet. Even Krell had stopped working and was staring at Sarah with something like awe. I think I understand now, Vexen said softly, why the other researchers couldn't finish their work, why their notes were incomplete. They got scared. No, I think they realized that studying humans was pointless. You can't understand something that is constantly changing, constantly adapting, constantly becoming more dangerous. Sarah nodded. Now you're getting it. Vexen turned off her recording device. The official tests were over. What came next was off the record. What would you do, she asked, if you were in my position? Sarah considered the question seriously. Honestly, I'd recommend that your people avoid conflict with humans whenever possible. Trade with us, ally with us, but don't fight us, because even if you win, you'll lose. The cost will always be too high. And if conflict can't be avoided, then end it quickly, decisively. Don't give us time to adapt. Don't let the war drag on. Sarah's expression was grim. Because the longer a war lasts, the better we get at fighting it. That's just how we're built. Vexen made a decision in that moment. She would include all of this in her report to the High Council. Not just the data about adrenaline and hormones, but everything Sarah had told her. The history, the psychology, the warning. Maybe they would listen. Maybe they would choose peace instead of war. Or maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they would think they could win. Maybe they would learn the hard way why humanity was feared. Either way, Vexen had done her job. She had studied the humans. She had finally understood. And understanding terrified her. 3 days later, Vexen stood before the High Council to present her findings. The chamber was vast and intimidating, filled with the most powerful Corvans in the Empire. They sat in a semicircle of raised seats, looking down at her with cold, calculating eyes. Research Director Thalen stood beside her, his scales a neutral gray. He had reviewed her report and approved it without comment. She didn't know if that was a good sign or a bad one. Dr. Vexen, said High Counselor Krath, the oldest and most respected member of the council. You have spent 5 days studying the human prisoner. Tell us what you have learned. Vexen took a deep breath. Honored counselors, I have learned that humans are far more dangerous than we ever imagined. She activated her data pad and projected images onto the chamber's main screen. Charts, graphs, chemical structures. The key to human combat ability is a hormonal system they call the fight or flight response. When humans perceive danger, their bodies release a chemical called adrenaline into their bloodstream. This chemical produces remarkable effects. She listed them one by one. Enhanced strength up to double normal capacity. Improved reaction time, twice as fast as baseline. Increased pain tolerance, allowing them to fight through injuries that would incapacitate other species. Heightened senses, making them more aware of threats and opportunities. These effects can last for extended periods, Vexen continued. Long after the immediate danger has passed, the human body remains in a state of heightened readiness. This explains why human soldiers can fight for hours without tiring, and why they seem immune to injuries that should stop them. The council members exchanged glances. Some looked intrigued, others looked worried. This is valuable information, Counselor Krath said. If we understand how this chemical works, we can develop countermeasures, gases or drugs that block the adrenaline response. Without it, humans would be weak and slow, easy to defeat. That is true, honored counselor, Vexen said carefully, but I must caution against that approach. Krath's eyes narrowed. Explain. The adrenaline response is only one aspect of human danger. The more significant threat is psychological. She changed the display to show historical records. Battles where humans had won against overwhelming odds. Wars where smaller forces had defeated larger ones through patience and determination. Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. They have developed warfare into a science. More importantly, they have developed a psychological tolerance for prolonged conflict that exceeds any species in my experience. She took another breath. This was the hard part. Even if we found a way to neutralize their adrenaline response, the humans would adapt. They would develop new tactics, new technologies, new ways of fighting, and they would never stop. Even if it took generations, they would keep fighting until they won or until they were all dead. The chamber was silent. Vexen could feel the weight of the council's attention pressing down on her. "What are you recommending, Dr. Vexen?" Counselor Krath asked quietly. "I am recommending that we avoid conflict with humanity whenever possible. The costs of war would be too high, regardless of outcome. I am recommending that we pursue peaceful relations instead." One of the younger counselors stood up. His scales were flushed with anger. "This is cowardice. We are Corvans. We do not fear soft-skinned mammals who come from a primitive world." "With respect, Counselor," Vexen replied, "it is not cowardice to recognize a threat and respond appropriately. The human in our custody killed 12 of our finest warriors in minutes. She was unarmed, malnourished, and outnumbered. Imagine what an army of humans could do." The angry counselor opened his mouth to respond, but Counselor Krath raised a hand for silence. "Dr. Vexen raises valid points," Krath said, "but there is another factor to consider. The human we hold is a killer. 12 families have lost sons and daughters because of her. They demand justice." Vexen felt her stomach sink. "What kind of justice?" "Execution. The human must die for her crimes." "Honored counselor, I must object. The human was defending herself. Our soldiers attacked her ship without provocation. The circumstances do not matter," Krath interrupted. "Our people are angry. They want someone to blame, and they will not accept a simple apology." Vexen's mind raced. If they executed Sarah Chen, what would happen? She thought about the human's words. Humans never forget when someone wrongs them. They never give up, even when it would be smarter to surrender. What would other humans do when they learned that the Corvans had killed one of their own? Would they accept it and move on? No, of course not. That wasn't how humans worked. "Counselor," Vexen said urgently, "I must warn you. Killing this human could have consequences that reach far beyond our borders. Humanity will not ignore the death of one of their people. They will demand explanations. They will demand accountability. And if they don't get satisfaction through diplomacy—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. The council understood. Counselor Krath was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke in a voice that carried the weight of many years. "What would you suggest, Dr. Vexen? We cannot simply release the human. That would show weakness." Vexen thought fast. "We could transfer her to a neutral third party. The Teloran Confederation, perhaps. They could mediate between us and humanity, help us find a resolution that satisfies everyone. That would require admitting fault. Better to admit fault than to start a war we cannot win." The chamber erupted in argument. Some counselors agreed with Vexen. Others were outraged at the suggestion of admitting weakness. The angry young counselor was practically screaming about Corvan honor and the need for vengeance. Through it all, Counselor Krath sat in silence, watching and listening. When the noise finally died down, he spoke again. "We will consider Dr. Vexen's recommendations, but the final decision will be made tomorrow after we have had time to deliberate." He looked directly at Vexen. "You have given us much to think about, Doctor. You are dismissed." Vexen bowed and left the chamber. She had done everything she could. The rest was out of her hands. That night, Vexen returned to the research center. She needed to see Sarah Chen one more time. She needed to prepare her for what might come. The human was awake when Vexen entered the observation room. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall with a distant expression. "You spoke to your leaders today," Sarah said without turning around. "Yes, how did you know?" "I can hear things sometimes. Through the walls. Your people aren't as quiet as they think." Vexen moved to stand at the observation window. "I told them everything, about adrenaline, about human psychology, about why they shouldn't fight your species. Did they listen? Some of them, others were less receptive. Sarah finally turned to face her. There was something in her eyes that Vexen hadn't seen before. It took her a moment to recognize it. Resignation. They're going to execute me, aren't they? Vexen hesitated. I don't know, the decision hasn't been made yet. But that's what some of them want. Yes. Sarah nodded slowly. She didn't seem surprised. I figured. Politics is the same everywhere, I guess. Someone needs to pay for what happened, and I'm the convenient choice. I tried to stop it. I recommended diplomatic solutions. I know, I heard some of that too. Sarah's expression softened. Thank you for trying, Dr. Vexen. I didn't expect anyone here to care about what happened to me. You're a person. Whatever else you might be, you're still a person. You deserve to be treated fairly. Sarah laughed softly. That's a surprisingly philosophical statement from a scientist. Scientists are people too. We have values, ethics. They were both quiet for a moment. Then Sarah spoke again, her voice thoughtful. Can I tell you something, Doctor? Something I've been thinking about since I got here. Of course. When I fought your soldiers, I wasn't thinking about tactics or strategy. I wasn't calculating the best way to win. I was just reacting. The adrenaline was in control and I was along for the ride. She paused. But afterward, when I calmed down and saw what I had done, I felt sick. I killed 12 people. They had families, friends, lives. They were trying to kill you. I know, and I'd do it again if I had to. That's not the point. Sarah looked down at her hands. The point is that humans are dangerous because we can do terrible things and then live with ourselves afterward. We can rationalize anything, justify anything, convince ourselves that whatever we did was necessary. She met Vexen's eyes. That's the part that should really scare you, not the adrenaline, not the fighting ability, the psychological flexibility, the ability to do horrible things and still sleep at night. Vexen felt a cold certainty settle into her bones. Sarah Chen was telling her something important, not just about humans in general, but about what might happen if the High Council made the wrong choice. If they execute you, Vexen said slowly, what will your people do? Sarah's expression was unreadable. I don't know, I'm just a cargo pilot, nobody important. Maybe they'll let it go. Maybe they'll decide it's not worth fighting over. But maybe they won't. Maybe not, Sarah shrugged. Like I said, humans are unpredictable. We do crazy things sometimes, things that don't make sense from a rational perspective. Because of adrenaline. Because of everything. Adrenaline, anger, grief, pride, all the emotions that make us human. Sarah smiled, and there was something ancient and terrible in that smile. We're not rational creatures, Doctor. We just pretend to be. Vexen made a decision. It was against regulations. It might cost her career, but she didn't care anymore. I'm going to try one more time, she said. Tomorrow morning, before the council makes their decision, I'm going to speak to Counselor Krath in private. I'm going to tell him everything you've told me. Maybe it will make a difference. Sarah tilted her head. Why? Because I'm a scientist. My job is to find the truth and share it. And the truth is that killing you would be a mistake, not just morally, strategically. It would be the worst decision the Corvan Empire has ever made. You really believe that? Yes. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, then she nodded. Okay, thank you, Doctor, I appreciate you trying. Get some sleep, Vexen said. Whatever happens tomorrow, you'll need your strength. Sarah lay back on the bed and closed her eyes. This time, Vexen noticed, her hands were open and relaxed. The fists were gone. Maybe that meant something, or maybe it didn't. Vexen turned off the lights and left the room. The next morning, Vexen arrived at Counselor Krath's private office before dawn. She had not slept at all. Her mind had been too busy running through arguments, organizing data, preparing her final plea. Krath was already awake when she arrived. He sat behind a massive desk made of polished stone, reading documents by the light of a single lamp. He looked old and tired in a way that Vexen had never noticed before. Dr. Vexen, he said without looking up, I expected you would come. Honored Counselor, I need to speak with you before the decision is made. I know what you're going to say. Krath finally raised his eyes. You're going to tell me that executing the human is a mistake, that it will provoke retaliation, that we should seek peace instead of revenge. Yes, and you're probably right. Krath sighed and set down his documents. I've been thinking about it all night. The data you presented, the history, the warnings, everything points to the same conclusion. Vexen felt a spark of hope. Then you'll stop the execution. It's not that simple. Krath leaned back in his chair. The political pressure is enormous. 12 families want justice. The military wants to send a message. Many on the council believe that showing mercy would be seen as weakness. With respect, counselor, it's not mercy, it's wisdom. There's a difference. Krath smiled slightly. Perhaps, but try explaining that to a grieving father who wants someone to pay for his son's death. Then explain that his son's death was caused by our own military's mistake. They attacked a peaceful cargo ship. They started the confrontation. The human was defending herself. We can't admit that publicly. It would undermine confidence in our military leadership. Vexen felt her frustration building. So instead we execute an innocent person and risk war with a species that will never stop fighting us. How is that better? Krath was quiet. The only sound in the room was the soft hum of the environmental systems. Finally, he spoke. I've been in politics for 70 years, Dr. Vexen. I've seen empires rise and fall. I've watched good decisions lead to disaster and bad decisions lead to prosperity. There's no formula for getting it right. You just do your best and hope. And what is your best telling you now? Krath looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. It's telling me that you're right. Executing the human would be a mistake, but it's also telling me that I might not be able to stop it. Then let me help. Let me speak to the council again. Let me. No, Krath raised a hand. If anyone speaks against execution today, it needs to be me. I have the authority. I have the respect. Coming from anyone else, it would be dismissed as sentiment. Vexen's hope began to fade. And will you speak against it? I'll try, but I make no promises. Krath stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Go back to your laboratory, Dr. Vexen. Whatever happens today, you've done your part. The rest is up to the council. Vexen wanted to argue. She wanted to push harder, to demand action, to force Krath to make the right choice. But she knew it wouldn't help. Some things were beyond her control. Thank you for listening, counselor, she said. Thank you for trying, doctor. Vexen left the office and walked slowly back to the research center. The morning air was cool against her scales. In a few hours, the council would convene and make their decision. Sarah Chen's fate would be sealed. And maybe, Vexen thought, the fate of the entire Corvan Empire along with it. The council chamber was full when the decision was announced. Every seat was occupied. Every eye was focused on Counselor Krath as he rose to speak. Vexen stood at the back of the room, her heart's pounding. She had done everything she could. Now all she could do was watch. The council has reached a decision regarding the human prisoner designated Sarah Chen, Krath said. His voice was calm and steady, betraying nothing of his inner thoughts. We have considered all the evidence. We have weighed the desire for justice against the need for prudence. We have debated the risks and the consequences. He paused. The silence was absolute. The human will be released. A murmur ran through the chamber. Some voices were relieved, others were angry, but Krath continued before anyone could interrupt. She will be transferred to Teloran custody immediately. The Teloran Confederation will mediate discussions between the Corvan Empire and the Human Confederation regarding compensation for the incident that led to her capture. Furthermore, Krath said, his voice growing harder, the military commander who ordered the attack on her ship will be investigated for unauthorized use of force. If the investigation finds fault, appropriate consequences will follow. The angry young counselor leaped to his feet. This is outrageous. We are rewarding the human for killing our people. We are preventing a war, Krath replied coldly. One that we would eventually lose. Dr. Vexen's research has made that clear. He looked directly at Vexen across the chamber. Sometimes wisdom requires us to accept an uncomfortable truth. Humanity is not an enemy we can defeat through force. They are a species we must learn to coexist with, and that starts today with this decision. The debate continued for another hour, but the outcome was decided. The council had voted. Sarah Chen would live. Vexen didn't wait for the session to end. She left the chamber and ran back to the research center. She needed to tell Sarah the news herself. When she reached the observation room, Sarah was already standing at the window. She had heard something, voices, movement, the change in atmosphere that signaled something important was happening. "What's going on?" she asked. Vexen pressed the intercom button. "You're being released. They're sending you to the Teloran Confederation. You're going home." Sarah's expression shifted through several emotions: disbelief, hope, relief. Then she smiled, a real smile this time without any danger or sadness. "Thank you," she said. "I don't know what you did, but thank you. I just told them the truth. The rest was up to them. The truth matters. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." Vexen nodded. "I'll remember that." 3 hours later, Vexen stood on the landing platform watching the Teloran transport prepare for departure. Sarah Chen was already on board, finally free of her restraints, finally on her way home. Krell stood beside Vexen, his scales a thoughtful shade of blue. "Do you think we made the right choice?" "I think we made the only choice," Vexen replied. "Everything else would have been worse." "And what do we do now? How do we prepare for the future?" Vexen thought about everything she had learned. The adrenaline, the psychology, the endless human capacity for adaptation and survival. "We learn," she said finally. "We study. We try to understand them better, not to find their weaknesses. That's a trap. We need to understand them so we can work with them, so we can find common ground." "Is that possible, with creatures so different from us?" Vexen remembered something Sarah had said during one of their conversations. Something about how humans felt sick after doing violence, even when it was necessary. How they carried the weight of their actions with them. "I think it might be," she said. "They're different from us in many ways, but they're also similar. They have families, they have friends, they have values and principles. They don't want war any more than we do." The transport's engines hummed to life. Through one of the windows, Vexen could see Sarah Chen looking out at the landing platform. Their eyes met for a moment. Sarah raised one hand in a gesture that Vexen had learned was a human sign of farewell. Vexen raised her own hand in response. Then the transport rose into the sky and disappeared into the clouds. "Dr. Vexen," Krell said, "what was the most important thing you learned from studying the human?" Vexen considered the question carefully. She thought about the adrenaline tests, the strength measurements, the recordings of the battle. She thought about Sarah's stories and warnings and the cold look in her eyes when she talked about human warfare. "But that wasn't the most important thing, not really. I learned that they're afraid of us too," she said finally. "Just like we're afraid of them. They fight so hard because they're scared. They never give up because they're scared. All that adrenaline, all that psychology, it's fear turned into action. That doesn't sound like a species to be afraid of. It sounds like a species to feel sorry for. Maybe, or maybe that's what makes them so dangerous. Fear can make you do terrible things, but it can also make you do incredible things." Vexen looked up at the sky where the transport had vanished. "The humans have been fighting for their survival since the beginning, and they've won. Over and over again, against all odds, they've won. Because of adrenaline. Because of everything. Adrenaline gives them the power to fight, but fear gives them the reason. And that combination, power and motivation together, is the most dangerous force in the galaxy." Krell was quiet for a moment. Then he asked the question that had been bothering Vexen since the beginning. "Do you think they'll forgive us for what we did to Sarah Chen?" Vexen didn't answer immediately. She remembered what Sarah had said about humans never forgetting when someone wronged them. She remembered the stories about generations-long wars and grudges that lasted for centuries. But she also remembered the smile Sarah had given her at the end, the genuine gratitude, the warmth. "I think they might," Vexen said, "if we give them a reason to, if we prove that we can be trusted, if we show them that we're not the enemy. And if we can't, then we'd better hope we never have to fight them, because now I understand something that I didn't understand before." "What's that?" Vexen turned away from the empty sky and began walking back to her laboratory. There was so much work still to do, so much to learn, so much to prepare for. I understand why every species in the galaxy fears humanity. It's not their strength, it's not their technology, it's not even their adrenaline. She paused at the door and looked back at Krell. It's the fact that they never ever give up. No matter how bad things get, no matter how hopeless the situation seems, they just keep fighting. She pushed open the door. And that's something we can never truly prepare for, because it's something we could never truly understand. Not until today. The door closed behind her, and Krell was left alone on the landing platform, staring up at the sky where the human had disappeared. Somewhere out there, among the stars, humanity was waiting. Billions of them. All of them carrying that same fire in their blood, that same refusal to surrender, that same terrifying capacity for violence and survival. The Corvan Empire had made a choice today. They had chosen peace. Krell hoped it was enough. He hoped it would always be enough. Because now he understood the truth that Dr. Vexen had discovered. The truth that the other researchers had learned too late. Humans were not just another species to be studied and understood. They were a force of nature, a storm that could not be predicted or controlled. They could be allies or enemies, friends or foes, but they could never be ignored. The adrenaline was just the beginning, just the chemical foundation of something much larger and more powerful. Behind the adrenaline was millions of years of evolution on a death world. Behind that was thousands of years of culture and warfare and adaptation. Behind that was every human who had ever lived and died and fought and survived. All of that history, all of that experience, all of that will, it was condensed into every human being. Every one of them carried the legacy of their entire species in their blood. And now Krell understood why the scientists who had studied humans before had never finished their work. It wasn't because they died before they could complete it. It was because there was no end to what could be learned. The more you studied humans, the more you discovered. The more you discovered, the more you realized how little you knew. They were infinite, unfathomable, endlessly complex and endlessly dangerous. And they were out there right now, spreading across the galaxy, making alliances and enemies, building their civilization one world at a time. The Corvans had made peace with them today. But tomorrow was another day. And no one, not even the humans themselves, knew what tomorrow would bring. Krell took one last look at the sky. Then he turned and followed Dr. Vexen back into the research center. There was still so much to learn.